In the Bible, two more symbols of time and space are wisdom and folly. Like the floor plans for a house, wisdom is the first principle of building space. As stated in Proverbs, the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Therefore, true wisdom begins by establishing the identity of God as a creator, and then working to shape earth so that it manifests his heavenly identity. This is the process of building space and provides humanity with the embodied knowledge of the creator within creation, allowing man to become a fractal microcosm of God within God. The summation of this is theosis, when man has emptied himself entirely so that his body can host and join with the body of God. It is the meaning of salvation, or divinization. In stark contrast, folly is the principle of the clown, and is founded on nothingness or absurdity. As stated by the psalmist, the fool says in his heart, God is not. And in Ecclesiastes, the fool folds his arms together and eats his own flesh. In this case, the fool inverts the identity of God, calling him not, and refuses to engage in productive work, choosing instead to fold his arms. The full scale of this inversion is emphasized using the absurd imagery of cannibalism, which is a negation of the real work required to refine raw matter into food to be integrated into the body, creating a loop instead. In general, wisdom is the principle of space characterized by work, purposefulness, efficiency, and accumulation, whereas folly is the principle of time characterized by idleness, distraction, and clumsiness. As stated in Ecclesiastes, I realize that wisdom is better than folly, as light is better than darkness. The fool is best understood as a manifestation of cyclical time, and is therefore not only the cause of destruction and inversion, but also of renewal and recreation, or recreation. His role is to distract from work, question authority, and loosen what is tightly bound. This symbolism is clearly preserved in the modern-day carnival, where the circus clown depicts the archetypal fool. They use laughter to make us crack up, or to loosen the rigid binds of familiar space. In general, humor itself is a form of lying, although it is not usually as serious as perjury or false testimony. Nonetheless, it still implies all types of inversions, misunderstandings, and cognitive frameworks that don't fit. The clowns themselves are physical incarnations of laughter, as they are walking contradictions that manifest the axle of time through juggling, swallowing flaming swords, taming wild animals for distraction, and always wearing clothes that don't fit. Moreover, they are joyful manifestations of the wandering perspective, evident by their red noses and disheveled appearances which symbolize drunken, homeless wanderers. They are completely under the influence of time because they have lost or abandoned the stability of space and the advantages of work and accumulation. They oscillate between happiness and sadness, illustrating how one side secretly implies the other. The higher one's emotional state flies, the sharper it will snap back, and the harder the party, the more painful the hangover. So although they spend most of their time fooling others, in the end they only fool themselves. The carnival and circus are modern manifestations of this ancient inversion festivals, which have inevitably popped up and existed in every age. For example, in ancient Israel, the Jewish holiday of Purim celebrated the story of Esther, which is based entirely on the cycle of time and its mysteries. This festival is a celebration of debauchery and involves drinking enough to make the entire world spin, cross-dressing, and all other types of pointless inversion. In medieval times, the Feast of Fools was an inversion celebration where the lowest and least qualified members of society were satirically elected as kings and bishops for a day, engaging in ridiculously hilarious and borderline heretical activities like the celebration of clown masses with donkeys and other things that are strictly forbidden in the laws of space. In more modern times, holidays like Mardi Gras and Halloween serve the inevitable role of inversion festivals, allowing us to push beyond the limits of what is traditionally acceptable and explore the world of spookiness. Although this does not come without a price, Halloween is followed by All Saints' Day and a strict period of Advent to prepare for the Incarnation, and Mardi Gras is followed by Lent, a period of asceticism in preparation for Easter. In both cases, the laws of space are allowed to be broken because they will henceforth illuminate higher truths. Although in a normal world the distinction between Mardi Gras and Lent would have been clear, in recent years the lines have become a bit blurred. For example, cross-dressing was traditionally something humorously done during inversion festivals as an ironic joke, although now it is unironically serious. Furthermore, although in the medieval Feast of Fools clown masses were celebrated for one day as a joke, they are now unironically commonplace and seen as heroically progressive means towards serious spiritual progress. All of this is deeply symbolic of a world where reality is a joke, and jokes are reality, an upside-down world of carnival and inversion. In general, all forms of entertainment are cyclical influences to varying degrees as they facilitate distraction, rest, and recreation. For example, theater and acting are based entirely on lies and deceit, as actors wear masks and pretend to be people who they are not. Perhaps it is no coincidence that the mask is the primary symbol of our times, indicating that the time cycle is once again manifesting itself in an age dominated by illusion and deceit. Furthermore, games of chance and gambling are also symbols of the cycle and its powers of irrational transformation. They are usually associated with rest and distraction, as well as shady activities that are counterproductive to the establishment of clear space, because they are based on the influence of luck rather than work or reason. Gamblers are often thrown into the time cycle, oscillating between extreme wealth and happiness and crushing bankruptcy and depression. Moreover, when financial markets themselves become objects of gambling, this causes a boom and bust cycle, which in its extreme may shed doubt on the underlying economic model and the ability for society to accumulate resources in a stable manner through that model. Although speculation is inevitable, an excess facilitates a carnival economy, where financial realities are only tethered to the pointless winds of fervor, which ultimately comes cascading down an emotional stampede of fear and a whirlwind of chaotic foreclosures. On the flip side, although this is destructive, it also provides the opportunity for renewal and recreation. Ultimately, like a northern star, the identity of God gives orientation to the compass that is our conscience. By abandoning a unifying identity, the fool throws society into a chaotic carnival, which tosses and turns on the whims of autonomous, warring, and contradictory passions. These cyclical patterns invert themselves at every impasse, described in Ecclesiastes. The words of the wise are gracious, but the lips of the fool swallow themselves. Hence, without orientation towards God, the constituent elements of space dissolve back into an idiosyncratic quantum soup, no longer bound in an intelligible way through a unifying principle. This is a definition of death, when all your atoms dissolve back into dust. Yet, because God is the singular creator of all things, even the manifestation of clowns has some divine purpose. To understand this, recall the definition of space. As discussed in previous videos, stable space is created through a hierarchy that is formed by a union of a heavenly pattern with the facts of material reality. This makes reality meaningful, perceptible, and navigable for humans. However, the force of time causes material reality to change, so that the facts of reality no longer support and express the principle at the top of the hierarchy. Because of this, all hierarchical institutions are perpetually subject to decay and are in constant need of renewal. This makes the rule of the fool essential, because they ensure hierarchies do not become tyrannical. By pointing out the limitations and blind spots, fools humble human leaders and expose their deficiencies. By distracting from authority and loosening what was tightly bound, they introduce flexibility necessary for hierarchies to change and adapt without becoming outdated or tyrannical. For as it is said in Proverbs, pride goes before disaster, and a haughty spirit before a fall. In a similar way, the rule of the medieval jester is twofold. First, they subvert the authority of reason and work by providing entertainment and jokes. Secondly, they critique the king, humorously pointing out flaws and limitations so that the hierarchy can take the opportunity to renew and adapt. For an example of the regenerative power of the fool, consider the story of King David. In general, the story of David is about harnessing the cyclical influences of time to renew a corrupt hierarchy. David begins by procuring a stumbling stone, which smites the mighty Goliath, which is similar to the stumbling stone that destroyed the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. In later narratives, he uses the influence of music to heal the soul of Saul, a king tormented by evil spirits. To understand how music is an influence of death and rebirth, consider the prevalent themes in modern-day rock and roll. Music is played to bring down the house, and is generally about the wave and its cycle. In this case, David is renewing the hierarchy of kingship through cyclical influence of music, thereby establishing a balance between time and space. Later on, he uses the influence of deception and clownery against Saul when Saul is unjustly pursuing him. As Saul descends into a cave, a symbol of darkness and chaos, to relieve himself, David sneaks behind him and cuts off the back of his pants. When Saul returns to the light, the nakedness of his backside is on full display. Therefore, David symbolically illustrates how the king's authority cannot sufficiently account for all aspects of his kingdom, like the innermost recesses of dark caves where remainders and exiles, in this case human feces in David, reside. In the end, King David becomes a sort of messianic figure due to his ability to properly harness the power of cyclical time so that it renews space, without flooding or destroying it. Although ultimately, This pattern is brought to completion in Christ, who paradoxically harnesses the power of death, which is the destruction and negation of space, in order to renew space. Christ allows himself to be turned into a joke, called King of the Jews, and is publicly humiliated as his clothes are gambled over while he lay helpless on a cross. However, in godlike fashion, he inverts this by playing the ultimate Uno reverse card. Instead of clinging to the material world or his own human nature, Christ obediently empties himself, letting go of the limitations of the finite so as to make room for the infinite. Ultimately, the cross, a symbol of Roman power and dominance, is inverted and made into the symbol of Christianity, which paradoxically destroyed the Roman Empire by allowing the Roman Empire to destroy it. In the end, this double inversion, destroying death by death, was something risky that could not have been effectively pulled off by anyone other than the Messiah himself. St. Paul points out the humor in this situation, saying, "The message of the cross is foolishness for those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God." And he continues, "Where's the wise one? Where's the scribe? Where's the debater of this age? Has God not made the wisdom of the world foolish?" Following Christ, St. Paul recognizes his own futile nature and embraces time and its cyclical mysteries, ultimately traveling to Rome to die, which helps to immortalize himself and Christianity while simultaneously cementing the death of Rome. To understand a more modern manifestation of foolishness, consider how our technological innovation has made us foolish, facilitating a denial of God's existence, which has ultimately shed doubt on the nature of identity, hierarchy, and authority itself. The prevailing philosophical claim is that of the clown, namely that all hierarchy is tyrannical and must therefore be subverted and overthrown. Therefore, even identity itself is viewed negatively, and the structures of coherent category like gender are dissolving. Ironically, this constant state of undermining and renewing is paradoxical, because once the underminer subverts authority and climbs to power, their own philosophical system dictates that they too must be undermined.
Guess the Joker's as crazy as they say. Where's the alarm guy?
Boss told me when the guy was done, I should take him out. One less share, right?
Funny, he told me something similar.
No!
Like a Ferris wheel, this puts society in an eternal revolution, or a circle characterized by pointlessness. Therefore, in the end, the fool only fools himself. Dostoevsky commented on this, saying, "God is dead. Everything is allowed." Society is in clown world, rocking and rolling to the unpredictable whims of passion. The inversion is currently so severe that figures of authority, like politicians, are now the largest source of entertainment and humor for the American public, while comedians have become the primary sources of authority and intelligence. In this way, the role of the fool in the flowing current of cyclical time is coming full circle. Although initially it was the clowns like Descartes and Nietzsche who threw us into spiritual exile by claiming God was dead and thereby destroying space, the fools now have a chance to revert society back towards a proper hierarchy if they can empty themselves and embrace the mystery of cyclical time, becoming holy fools like Christ before us. Even Dostoevsky said, "I believe the world will be saved by beauty." Therefore, the power of inversion is the power which destroys stable space, but also the power that renews and recreates the earth. In our time of current spiritual exile, humor and other forms of creative or artistic expression are needed to renew order, but a fine line is to be walked. For these are also the influences that destroy stable space, and improperly harnessing their power may contribute to the breakdown, not renewal, of civilization. Ultimately, the loss of the identity of God as a singular source of both space and time has facilitated the arrival of two contradictory states, both of which are brought about by the disordering and improper orientation of the passions. To understand this, consider that angels are fallen demons who refuse to worship God. Therefore, when the passions natural to mankind, sexuality, humor, rest and laziness, intoxication, theater and music, are not oriented towards God, they become their own autonomous gods. Like the angels that fell from heaven and became demons, they throw mankind and civilization into the time cycle, an eternal revolution, a carnival of debauchery. This process is more formally known as clown world, and is a type of flood that is in excess of time. However, it usually facilitates another extreme. As discussed in the last video, when the intellect, reason, and work of mankind refuses to worship God, it makes itself into an idol. Instead of being angelic, reason and work become demonic when they are not oriented towards God. Pride takes over, and seeks to develop a system whereby man numbers, accounts for, and explains all aspects of reality to create his own salvation. This process is more formally known as 666, as it is an excess of space. The only solution to this tug of war between time and space, therefore, can come through the identity or name of God, who is the singular author of both realms. Christianity is the process of coming to the embodied knowledge of God within creation, and thereby allows one to transcend the dichotomy of space and time through the process of deification. Thank you for your attention to this video. Please support God's dog, buy Language of Creation, and read it on your own. Please like, share, and subscribe, and feel free to comment me or message me on Twitter if you have any questions.